What else? Another common thing that employers will do is to accept what we call unacceptable documents. You can't accept hospital birth certificates. You can only accept documents that are on that list, on that page of the I-9. The big one, too, is, very often restricted Social Security cards. What do I mean by restricted Social Security cards? For folks, certain folks who have work visas or who have green cards, there'll be restricted language on the Social Security card that says not valid for employment without INS or DHS authorization. So you're not allowed to accept a restricted Social Security card as a List C document, so be careful about that one. Other common ones, remember Bernie had mentioned that they've taken the naturalization certificate off the list, so you can't use that. And then the big new one as well is, remember, you can no longer accept expired identity documents, so don't accept any of those. And this is a hard thing. If you've been doing this for a long time, if you've been doing this for 10, 15 years, you think you know that list, but you know what? It's just always a good idea just to have that list handy when you're going through it. Don't trust your memory just because so many things change all of the time. Another mistake that I see in Section 2 is, employers will accept documents that don't reasonably relate to the employee. The common ones really are, they'll give you documents with different names or different dates of birth. When a woman gets married, very often they'll forget to change one document. We're going to tell you that in light of the current enforcement trend, you've got to be hardcore. It's a zero tolerance policy. Everything has to match. So if there are different names, you've got to make sure that the documents match, and you've got to ask the right questions to make sure those documents match. Another common one, too, is someone will attest that they are a U.S. citizen in Section 1, but they'll present a green card. Again, your documents don't reasonably relate to the employee, so you can't accept them. What else in Section 2? Very often I think it's human nature to ask for too many documents, or very often an employer will give you too many documents. They'll look at the list and they'll find as many documents as they can from lists A, B, and C, and they'll give you too many documents. So be careful, because over-documentation will lead to a discrimination claim. If an employer gives you too many documents, look at the list, pick the documents that you need, and complete Section 2 with those documents. Okay, what else? Other common mistakes that we see in Section 2 is where an employer will keep copies of certain documents for some employees, but they don't keep documents for everyone. You've got to be consistent. Whatever you decide to do, whether you're going to copy or not copy, and then we're going to talk about that a little bit more, you've got to be consistent across the board. So if you keep copies, make sure you keep copies for everyone else. The big one as well is, when you're completing the I-9 process with your employee, the person who reviews the original documents has to be the same person signing the form. Very often there'll be an administrative assistant who'll look at the forms, and then they'll give the I-9 to, the HR manager to sign. You cannot do that. The person who signs the forms has to be the one who sees the original documents. So a question that I get asked a lot is, well, what about remote offices and telecommuters and off-site locations? Can a foreman or someone else, what do you do when you can't physically get that person into the office? This is where one of the new questions that they included in the new M274 Employer Handbook is you can actually use a notary public. So, your remote employee or your telecommuter could go to a notary public to fill out everything. The notary would have to review the documents. They would have to sign off on Section 2. They cannot leave Section 2 for you to sign. And even though the notary signs it, the company is still liable for anything that's on those forms. Moving on to Section 3. Section 3 common mistakes. So very often an employee will forget to re-verify when they're required. I'm talking about those folks. Usually it's folks who have an EAD, a work authorization card, or it's someone on a work visa. You've got to remember to calendar those expiration dates to make sure you re-verify when it's required. You've got to fill in all the information in Section 3, and you've got to sign Section 3. One of the newer common issues that we're seeing, and this is where the form is deceptively simple, but it's confusing. Since April 3, 2009, remember, all of your documents have to be unexpired. They've got to be valid to complete the I-9. Remember, you're only going to update Section 3. You're only going to re-verify if someone's employment authorization is expiring. You're not going to re-verify if someone's identity documents are expiring. What else? I just wanted to show you a couple of examples of how to complete an I-9 if you've got someone on your workforce who's got some sort of work visa. There's no guidance in the book and the employer's handbook, but here's what we recommend. You're going to be filling out Section 2, the List A portion. The person's going to have an I-94 card. So that's going to be your document title. The issuing authority is going to be USCIS or DHS. The document number will be that I-94 card number, and then the expiration date will be the expiration date, and then you're going to, document number 2 is going to be the passport number. I usually will write the country that the country that person's from along with the expiration date. Now, in case all of this sounds like mumbo jumbo, what's an I-94 card? Hopefully those of you who are hiring foreign nationals and sponsoring them for work visas will know what it looks like, but these are just some of the examples. This is an I-94 card right here. They can also look like this. If you've sponsored someone, you'll often get an approval notice, and the I-94 card is this bottom part right here. So that's what an I-94 card looks like. And again, if usually if someone is presenting a foreign passport and an I-94 card to you for I-9 to complete the I-9, usually you would have sponsored them for a work visa. So if you haven't petitioned for them, if you haven't filed anything with immigration and they're presenting one of these to you, there's a good chance that they're not authorized to work for you. Another example I have, I've just got 2 short examples. Completing an I-9 for someone who's got one of these employment authorization documents or employment authorization cards, so the little plastic cards. Those are easy ones. It's a List A document. You complete Section 2, the List A block with document titles and EAD, issuing authorities, DHS, and then you fill in the WAC number or the file number and an expiration date. And these are what the EADs look like. And just so you know, for those of you who've signed up, we're actually going to be sending you a little package with an I-9 FAQ, as well as there's a really nice color guide with all samples of all the different sorts of work authorization documents that the government has issued. Okay, so moving on from some of the examples, let's talk about some of the other common issues, and one of the big ones is document abuse. What are some of the common mistakes that we see here? Remember I said you can't request any I-9 documents, any of these ID, employment authorization documents, before hire or during an interview, so no pre-screening. You can't specify which documents to accept. Remember, you have to provide the list to the employee, and they have to choose which documents they're going to present. You can't require more documents than what's required on the list. Again, if the employee gives you too many documents, just pick the ones that are required and complete Section 2 with those. You can't refuse to honor acceptable documents unless it looks like they're not reasonably genuine. And the last one I've got here, you can't ask to see a document that's listed from the Section 1 attestation. So if an employee fills out Section 1 and they say that they're a U.S. citizen or a green card holder, you cannot ask for the green card or the passport to complete Section 2. They are entitled to choose from the list. So when an employee presents you with the documents they've chosen from the list, you have to examine the original document. You cannot accept a photocopy. The only time you can accept a photocopy, the only exception is a certified copy of the birth certificate. Otherwise, anything that you're examining for I-9 purposes, you have to see the original. And that brings us to the question of, well, how do you know if it's real? The test is one of reasonableness. Does it appear to be genuine on its face, and does it relate to the person that's presenting the document? You're not required to be a document expert or a forensic expert, but, you do still have to examine it. So, a sure sign if someone gives you a passport and, they've sort of split the side, the little peasy part, and they've inserted a photo, and it's a photo stub. Again, it's common sense. If someone gives you a Social Security card that has too many digits or they're all zeros, again, common sense. If it doesn't appear to be genuine, you can ask them to produce a different document. Another common question, so should you keep a photocopy of the document that you've examined? You're not required to, but my recommendation is yes, you should be keeping photocopies of any of the documents you've examined. In the past, it was common practice not to copy anything just because, it could reveal errors in the compliance process and in the event